you don't have to finish things to get them off your mind, but you do have to appropriately engage with them. So, and the big secret, AJ, is
Hi guys, welcome to the show where we talk to the people who have followed their passion to achieve great success and have impacted many lives. If you have not already done so, then please do consider subscribing to this channel by hitting the subscribe button and tapping on the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future videos. I'm your host Ajay Mathur, and my guest today is a New York Times best-selling author. He has discovered or invented, we'll find out, a methodology which has created its own kind of industry. To just give you an idea of how big that is, he has partnership in over 90 different countries to teach that method. He has written 5 best-selling books that have been translated in 30 different languages. He has more than 2 million people enrolled to his program, and more than 300 software tools have been built based on the methodology that he has put together. Not just that, he also has more than 1 million followers on Twitter. Please welcome the best-selling author of one of the most transformational methodology in productivity improvement, GTD, Getting Things Done, David Allen. Welcome, David.
Hi, AJ. Thanks for the invitation, AJ. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Before you invented GTD, you already had 35 jobs before you turned 35. I want to know, was there any thought process behind doing so many jobs, or was there a long-term strategy to do that, or you were trying different things, or it just happened?
All the above. Certainly no long-term strategy. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. So I was in my mid to late 30s that I really wasn't sure. So lots of plans changed. I got very much involved in my own personal growth and self-development explorations, meditation, martial arts, spiritual practices, etc. As well as I thought I was going to be an academic, and so I, got a degree in history and intellectual history, and then I discovered academia was not where I was going to find my enlightenment anyway, and so dropped out and went on to major exploration. But they weren't paying people to do that, and I had to pay the rent, and so. And I had friends that seemed to know what they wanted to do. And so I became a pretty good number 2 guy. So I helped a lot of people that I know. I would just go in and they sort of hired me to be the number 2 person. And they just started a restaurant or managed a service station in LA or running a landscape company. And so I wound up just, coming in and looking around. And, my point of view is how much easier can we do this? I'm about the laziest guy you ever met. So I couldn't stand wasted time or energy. And so I just look around and see what the process, now they call that process improvement, pretty sophisticated idea. But back then it was just pretty common sense. It's called, how can we do this easier? So then I would help make them easier and improve their process. Then I got bored. So then I'd drop out and go find another job. And then I discovered they actually pay people to do that. They call them consultants.
Right.
And so I said, okay, well, maybe that's my career, and haven't looked back since. That was 1981, 82, a long time ago. And that seemed to fit me in terms of just my interest in so many different things. And I loved meeting and engaging with people doing very different things and learning lots of different things constantly. So I've never been bored, in 39 years. With all that stuff. So then I was also got fascinated with just good models. If it wasn't clear how to help, somebody with their business, but they wanted me to come in and look around, I'd say, well, it'd be nice if I had a model that I could use, that I could pull out of my pocket if it wasn't obvious how to help them. So I got very hungry for a model, also for myself, because my life was getting more complex. And I'd also discovered how nice it was to be in a clear space. The meditation and martial arts practices and so forth, it was really a very practical thing to be able to be present, have nothing on your mind, no distractions, so you could be fully available for whatever it was you were doing in your flow. And I saw how easy it was to have that flow, disturbed, when you got into a much more complex professional world and game. So I got very hungry and found techniques that worked for me. Piece by piece. I didn't wake up one morning with the Getting Things Done methodology, some grand epiphany. It's a long string of epiphanettes, as I call them, little ahas about that. Oh, that works. Oh, that one works too. Great. And I started to piece all those together. And then I turned around and used the same techniques that I found to work for me, which gave me more control, more focus, more stability, more space to focus on the meaningful stuff, and started using those with my customers, my clients. It turned out it produced exactly the same results for them. So it looked like I'd gotten a hold of something that seemed to be pretty universal that worked.
Yeah. So when did you realize that GTD is going to be such a game changer? It's going to grow this big? Did you had some idea about it, or it just
I had no idea. You know, I sort of lived my life with high anticipation and no expectation. So, you know, as I say, it took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out, and that it was unique, and that nobody else seemed to have done it quite in the same way, and that it was bulletproof. By that time, you know, when I wrote the first edition of Getting Things Done, published in 2001, but it took 4 years to do it. So I really started in the late 90s, you know, kind of pulling all this together. It took me that long to figure out what I'd figured out and that it was unique. And then at that point, I got some pretty good advice from some good friends that said, David, you ought to write the book. Now, let me be honest here. I've never had a traditional formal course in time management, business, or psychology. All that I came up with was just thousands of hours that I spent actually researching, you know, formulating, crafting this and formatting this methodology, and then handing it off and then training thousands of people and spending thousands of hours one-on-one with desk side with executives that wanted me to hold their hand and one-on-one help them implement the methodology. So, you know, I got thrust into the corporate training world back in 1983, 84. Where somebody recognized, wow, this is really cool stuff. We need this in our whole company, our whole culture. So they asked me to design a training program that would introduce a lot of people to this methodology instead of me just holding people's hands one-on-one and doing that. So I did, and it worked. It was highly successful. And then that just became a big referral-based kind of boutique training business that I wound up in, you know, between 1983 and, you know, up until actually, that really has never stopped. But once I wrote the book, and I just wrote the book just to get it out of my head. I had no idea whether it would sell, whether anybody would buy into it, because by that time in the late 90s and early 2000, it was pretty noisy marketplace out there. A lot of time management, organization stuff was already out there. So, you know, my stuff is significantly different than most of that. That may not look like that on the front end. So I didn't know. So I published the book, and then it took off. Yeah. And so, you know, it took a year or two, you know, on bestseller list, and then translated into lots of languages. So then the world started knocking on my door. Gee, David, can we be a GTD consultant? Oh, I'd love to be able to, you know, do this in China. I wanted to be able to do this in Poland. I want to do this in Brazil. And so trying to pay attention to the world knocking on our door, because I didn't really have to do that. By that time, the book was successful enough that I just my own keynote speaking and, you know, all that stuff could have been a fine lifestyle, but it's such good stuff, and it really helps anybody improve their condition. So I just felt like I couldn't hold it back. So with the small staff I had then, we decided, well, let's try to pay attention and see if we can scale this to some sort of a global thing. But we knew that it would require partnerships and technology. So that was 10, 15 years ago. And, you know, it's taken that long, but we've now got a very stable network of licensees and partners around the world that we found that are great. And we still manage certifying the master trainers in those regions, that then they can then certify trainers that they can then do coaching and training of the GTD methodology within their own regions and languages. So yeah, it's been a long haul. I wasn't particularly entrepreneurial or aspirational about all this. I was just trying to pay attention to what the world seemed to want and just do the best job I could to try to, you know, help guide it along. But boy, certainly not an area of expertise of mine, nor particularly an interest. I'm not a very good manager, executive, or entrepreneur, actually. Really more of a researcher than anything else, you know, and a formulator of a model. So long story. That's maybe longer than you needed, but that's a short version of a very long story.
Yeah, and definitely you have changed millions of lives, and I have read so many testimonials that says a lot about your work. So thanks for that. Most of the people who are watching this would probably know what is GTD is all about, and although and also it is very evident from the name itself, it's getting things done. But for the people who probably still don't know what it is all about, what it is all about, could you give us a very quick overview of the methodology, please?
Sure. It's just a set of best practices that if you actually do those practices, it starts to create more space in your head. You don't need time, you need room. It doesn't take time to have a good idea or be present or be loving or to be creative or to be innovative. But they do require room. You can't be distracted. You have to have a clear space. So I just figured over the years, what was the algorithm or the formula about how do you get stuff off your mind? And a lot of it had to do with dealing with the commitments you made with yourself, and many of them include other people. But how do I manage that inventory? And also a lot of it had to do with getting it out of your head. Your head is just a really crappy office. And I discovered that 35 years ago, but the cognitive scientists in the last decade have come up with lots of data to prove that basically the amount of things you can keep just in your head, if that's the only place you're trying to remember and remind stuff, is 4. You get many more than that, you're going to denigrate your cognitive process and your ability to remember and remind. You'll be waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning about something you can't do anything about. So a lot of it had to do with just what's the formula for how do you get stuff out of your head? And, there's a big write it down. Oh, I need cat food. Oh, I might want to get divorced. Oh, I think I need to hire a vice president of marketing. Oh, my mom's coming for a visit. Oh, yada, yada. And most people have made a lot more would, could, should, need to, ought to decisions with themselves than they realize. So a lot of what I did was uncover and discover how powerful and critical it is that people externalize all of that and capture it. So, there's a 5-step process if you read the book and even the website, you can see it. Basically capture stuff that has your attention, clarify exactly what it means, organize the results in some trusted system that you review and reflect on a regular basis. So you then engage in a trusted way with where you put your attention and your focus. So those 5 steps of capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage, I didn't make that up. I just recognized it. That's how you get your kitchen under control. It's how you get your company under control. It's how you get your consciousness under control. But as simple as that sounds, most people don't do anywhere near what they could do if they really wanted to get clear. They haven't captured stuff. They haven't clarified a lot of things that have their attention in terms of what they're going to do about them specifically, if anything. They haven't organized stuff into a trusted external brain that they trust will remind them of the right thing at the right time that they need to do. And they are not doing any kind of reflection process and sort of lifting up above the game and seeing the whole context of all their commitments on a regular basis and keeping all that current. And so then they're making decisions based upon latest and loudest as opposed to good strategic intuitive intelligence. So there's a short version of the whole story.
Okay, and in your first step about externalizing your thoughts, and there is one thing that you say, your brain is for having ideas, not holding them. That's my favorite David Allen quote, by the way.
Yeah.
And my question is that even if you have externalized it, there are instances when although you've written it somewhere, but it's still that particular task is knocking your mind every now and then and kind of disturbing you. How do you actually detach yourself from whatever you have put down on paper, for example?
Well, you have to go through steps 2 and 3. You wrote it down on paper called Mom. Well, why'd you write it down? Historical data? Yeah, you had one, I'm sure. Oh, her birthday's coming. Great. Well, what are you going to do about Mom's birthday? Oh, I don't know. So, okay, are you going to do something about her birthday? Yeah, I guess so. Great. So what's the next thing you need to do? I should call my sister and see what she thinks about doing something for Mom's birthday. Great. So call sis regarding Mom's birthday. Now you have an action step on this. And by the way, will that one action complete whatever this is? No, we're going to probably do stuff or whatever. Great. So now you've got a project. What's that? Celebrate Mom's birthday. Fabulous. So if this were me, I'd have a next action on my calls list called call sis. I'd have a project listed on my project list called, celebrate Mom's birthday. And as long as I'm looking at those appropriately, in appropriate timing, at the right time and place, it's off my mind. There's no reason for the mind to still have it. The only reason the mind has it is because it doesn't trust a system. Right? Most people are not being worried right now about where you need to be 2 weeks from Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? You may not like where you have to be 2 weeks from Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's not on your mind. Why? You've parked the appropriate reminder in the appropriate place, and you trust you'll look at your calendar, right? So you don't have to finish things to get them off your mind, but you do have to appropriately engage with them. So, and the big secret, AJ, is not getting things done. Is not so much about getting things done. It's really as much about just being appropriately engaged with all of your commitments in life, so that you're present with whatever you're doing. So it's not about working harder or faster or longer, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Productivity's got a lot of baggage as a word around it. Everybody thinks that means harder work or more time. Sometimes you do have to work harder. Sometimes you got to put your, shoulder to the wheel and spend some time doing it. But that's only when that's an appropriate thing to do or time to do. But you can't get enough of what you don't really need. And most people do not need to work harder. And so when they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, they try to work harder or longer hours or whatever. And that's not what they need. They need to feel appropriately engaged with whatever all those commitments are. And appropriate engagement doesn't mean you finish it. It means you've decided what is your commitment about it, and any outcome that you need to keep track of, and any action step that you need to start to move the needle on this, and park those reminders in appropriate places you trust you'll see at the right time. Then it's off your mind. But even, by the way, those of you who are listening or watching this who are GTDers, you say, yeah, but David, I just read the book, I just started to do it, but I still got stuff on my mind. Yeah, it takes about 2 months for your mind to start to trust, what you've done. Once it does, then you're cool. But you'd have to stick with it long enough so your mind goes, okay, I don't have to remember and remind, because it does not do that very well. And then you beat it up when you forget something, or you are not reminded about the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, and I think it's mainly to do with that trusting the system. As you said, it takes time to not have those thoughts knocking you again and again, and even after you have externalized it. So the problem is that more than, I don't know what's the exact percentage number is, but I think 60 to 70% thoughts that we have are negative thoughts. And once, let's say, you practice it for a month or two, does it help you reducing those negative thoughts also coming into your mind, the GTD?
It depends on what the negative thoughts are and what they're about. I mean, GTD really doesn't deal with your emotional life as such. It affects it tremendously, because you'll feel a whole lot better. And it's one of the principles I discovered is that there's a concept of a rotten apple destroys the barrel.
Yeah.
If you have one thing in your life or work that's bugging you, you're not appropriately engaged with, especially if it's an important or strategic thing, it colors your whole life. It makes your whole life feel overwhelming. As opposed to isolating what specifically has your attention about that. Great. What's the outcome you want to achieve? Fabulous. And what's the next step you need to take? So if you let yourself become victimized by any one of your commitments that you're not appropriately engaged with, it colors the whole thing, kind of gray. And the biggest issue for most people, I used to just say that it was overwhelm, but overwhelm handles itself. If you were truly overwhelmed, your building where you're sitting right now catches on fire, I guarantee you'll handle it. You may not like it, but you'll handle it.
Yeah.
Right? The real problem is the ambient anxiety people live in. This vague sense that there's stuff they should, might, could, would, ought to be doing. They just forgot what the heck it was, and they're not sure exactly how it fits into the whole game. They hope they don't miss anything, and so they let themselves get run by latest and loudest, but with this still vague sense of anxiety. And that ambient anxiety, I think, is the real killer. And so that's again what this methodology, can relieve, is that. But it's not free. You actually have to change some of your habits, like write stuff down instead of keep it in your head. That's a big habit for, professional adults to change.
Yeah, and many people actually do struggle with the decision making, and decision making comes from a better clarity of thoughts, right? How does GTD help people in their decision making abilities?
Well, first of all, it clears your head. When your head's clear and you're not being driven by or distracted by stress or things that you are worried about, and you can be totally present, it's a lot easier to trust your intuitive judgment, which is what you're going to have to trust anyway. There's never enough data to know that you're making a perfect decision about anything. You just have to make your best judgment call, and you just need to trust yourself enough, and then be willing to say, I'll be flexible enough to course correct if I get better data. And so, it's kind of like surfing through life, and It's not always easy. If it were always easy, you'd never grow or expand or really express yourself or stretch yourself into who you really are. So, being challenged is not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, that's what exercise does. That's what anything does out there, where you stretch and build muscle and build resilience and you build all kinds of things, in that. You don't want to just keep having the same kind of stress about the same kind of thing without resolving it, though.
Yeah.
So when you get in the stress, you need to identify what's causing it, what's got my attention about this, and then sit down and hold yourself to this thought process. Okay, great. What would I like to have true about this marriage? What would I like to have true about the merger? What would I like to have true about this pandemic world that we're living in? And then you need to define what those outcomes are, and then say, okay, if I had nothing else to do but move the needle toward that outcome, what would I need to do right now? Go online, get a small desk from IKEA, so you got a good home office set up. I need to have a conversation with my kids and my life partner about my work style and space here, so I've got a good place to work now that I have to work from home. So it's like getting grips. You don't have to like it. You actually don't have to like your life to get a clear head. I'm not a motivational speaker if that's not evident already.
Yeah.
I don't care how you feel. That'll change in hours anyway.
Okay, and if somebody applies GTD and gets the results, like complete a lot of stuff, how does the method ensures the quality of work that has been done?
Well, if the quality is not what it should be, you'll have attention on that, or somebody will, and then you'll have attention on their attention they've got about it, right? If nobody cares, where's the stress? You made a good decision, or a decision nobody cared about. At some point, you might go, yeah, but this is not leading me in the direction. Now you've got your attention on your direction and where you're going, what you want to do with your life. See, the levels of commitments take on some subtleties. You've got a commitment about why you're on the planet. How are you doing? What's your life purpose? You have a commitment about the vision you have about how you'd like your life to be, ideally 5 years from now, in your work. You probably have some vision about, within the next year or two, things you might need to have finished or accomplished or handled, so that you're moving toward whatever that picture is. And then you got all the stuff you got to manage, like your health and your vitality and your finances and your relationships and your dog and your fun factor and all that. And then you have all the projects you have about all the above. I got to get tires in my car, I got to hire the VP, I got to deal with my mother-in-law's visit. I got to, deal with if we can take a vacation or not, post-pandemic. Then you have all the actions you need to take about all the moving parts of everything I just said. And most people have 150 to 200 of those emails to send, meetings you need to go to, stuff you need to draft on your computer, things you need to buy at the hardware store or online. So, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just letting you know most people have a lot of those commitments, and getting clear about what all those things are make it a whole lot easier to be able to trust your choices about what you do, and as importantly, what you don't do. Because you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you really know what you're not doing, and most people don't have a clue. And it's not hard. This is not a foreign language or some new technology you need to learn. Everybody knows how to write stuff down. Everybody knows how to make a next action decision and an outcome clarification about anything they got their attention on, if you're conscious. And everybody knows how to make a list. Everybody knows how to look at a list. If you looked at your calendar or looked at a grocery list, you're already doing it. You're already demonstrating that your external brain's a lot better than your internal one. So again, this is, in a way, this is kind of a big duh, AJ. Right? Duh. This is not hard.
Yeah.
It is quite a change, though, for most people habitually to do it. We've discovered it takes most people, really good people that really bite into the getting things done methodology. It takes about 2 years before this is all habitual. You'd feel uncomfortable if you made a commitment right now to me and not writing it down, or I made a commitment to you and you didn't write it down. You'd feel uncomfortable. You would grab. That's why this is sitting right here, right by me, because God knows when lightning strikes, I'm doing something else that pops into me. I'm writing it down right then. So that's the kind of habit I'm talking about. Now, some people get it right away because they're so close to it anyhow, and it just resonates with them. They go, oh, that's why that works. So I wouldn't want to limit somebody and say it's going to be 2 years before you get value out of it. You get value in 30 seconds. Just write down 3 things that are on your mind, decide the next action on each one. you started to do it, you started to make some lists, you felt great, and then life threw itself at you and you fell off. That's fine. That happens typically, but that's okay. It doesn't take, it's hard. It's easy to fall off this game, but it's really easy to get back on. How do you get back on? Pen on paper, write it down, update your list. Think through the new stuff that showed up that you haven't captured yet.
Yeah, I think the struggle maybe other people also do have is in the last stage where you're talking about doing. So let's say I've made the list and at the last stage, I just keep procrastinating it. Do you have any tips on how to avoid procrastinating on the list that you have already got?
Well, one of the reasons people procrastinate is they actually slip away from the real discrete next action. Plan party, is not a next action. What's the next step you need to do to plan the party? Oh, I need to talk to my sister ahead of time. Right. And what happens is people start to make the list and then they slip away from the real granularity of a real next action. And then they haven't finished their thinking. And then some part of them says, I'm not sure exactly what to do next. I don't have the energy to think and decide right now. Stop reminding me I'm overwhelmed. And so even if you've written the stuff down, it can create as much stress as it relieves if you haven't clarified the next action. And once you clarify the next action, those are usually not that hard. They're usually pretty simple things to do. Most people the people who procrastinate the most are the most sensitive, creative, and intelligent people because they freak themselves out faster than anybody else when they just look at something and thinking of all the horrible demons that are going to attack them if it's not done perfectly. So they quit right then. As opposed to, engage. What was the old Top Gun movie, with what's his name? And he froze and like, engage. You need to get involved. So that's one reason. And sometimes people procrastinate because the thing they're looking at is really not that important and it's past its timing. A lot of people need to take stuff off your list. Back then, when you wrote it on the list, it was important or you thought you wanted to do it. Now it's kind of times have changed and you haven't renegotiated that with yourself. So you feel like you're procrastinating, but actually you're just probably making a good decision called timing is gone. So it could be a lot of different reasons, but those are some of the main ones.
I recently read in a report that people who are working from home are more productive than working in office. 90% people said that working from home is more productive. I want to know what makes people less productive at work.
Interruptions, distractions. It's pretty easy to be distracted by people walking around. It's pretty easy, especially if people around you don't do GTD and they're walking up to you and asking you something or giving you something when it should have been put into the system. And so it really stops you from doing that. Now, a lot of people working from home are being interrupted by their partner or by their kids. Same idea, but a little easier to manage that. Interestingly, I had somebody tell me not long ago, they said one of the downsides of working from home is they lost commute time. And they were using commute time to do executive thinking and strategizing and reflection time. They had no reflection time. I mean, if you've got kids at home, it's 24/7.
Yeah.
Right. So when do you get away to be able to think and reflect? But yeah, understood. It's basically lack of distraction. The main reason people are going to feel more productive at home. And they don't have commute time. They don't have all the in-between stuff that kind of gets in the way. If you've got enough sort of self-direction so that you've got a good office space at home and you need your own space to do that, and share, don't share that. That should be, you're cooking spaghetti, you suddenly think of an email you really got to send. You should be able to, turn the fire off on the stove, go walk in, sit down, shoot that email out, go back to cooking spaghetti. That often happens with me. I'd worked from home since 1981, so no big deal on my side. But you need to make sure that you feel comfortable with that. And once you do, if you've got a good, cockpit of control, where you live at home, yeah, it can be highly productive.
Yeah.
Simply because you can really get into the state, you can really flow, you can, especially if you have agreements with people around you that you live with, that sort of leave you alone during certain hours or when you're in that certain kind of state.
Yeah, and then there are two aspects to it, like traveling time that you just mentioned. When I was going to office, I was reading more books compared to now when I'm home. So I was using my travel commute time in reading, a
Sure.
lot of reading, and that is gone now. And for some people, it is like their they say that the traveling time is saved, so they're more productive at home. So it's a kind of the way you look at it and the way you use that spare time.
Sure.
Now that you've just said that you have been working from home since 1981, can you tell us how can we 10x our productivity while working from home,
Well, as I said
considering the
before,
fact that the work list at work and home may overlap now?
well, they always overlap. I mean, psychologically, they always overlap. If you're talking about, well, the honey-do list, it's funny. It was, a client of ours that was a big, 400,000 person global company, was head of executive development for them, and it was in Germany, based in Germany. And once he got GTD and he got coached in GTD, he started doing his weekly review, but realized the best thing to do was to do it at home on Friday mornings. And so, as a good German, worker and manager and executive, to not go into the office on Friday was way out of his comfort zone.
Right.
So he started to get more comfortable with that. But then he said the next problem was he'd be sitting there and his wife would come in and say, "Gee, dear, could you XYZ," as long as he was there. So he had to sort of train her, and then she got coached, and then she understood, okay, wait a minute, that's probably not the best way to do this. So again, building your relationships and communicating and renegotiating your agreements about how you manage time and space. And it really does help. Again, if you've got a work context and you're sitting in that work context and you sit down in that chair and you're doing work, got an in basket, you've got a note taker, you're working, then people around you should recognize that. Most of the time they do. And so they won't disturb you in that way. You get up and take a break and walk around, sure. Then it's open game, and say, "Gee, that's right. Yeah, but I need to get back to this. I'll get to that later this afternoon. Could you write that? Could you send me an email?" So Catherine and I email each other all the time, even though we're in the same house, same apartment. Why? Why should I interrupt her? That'd be the most discourteous thing in the world. Yeah, there are times I need to go over, just chat and just want to talk about something, just because you kind of take a little bit of a break for both of us. But the business of life stuff should be handled through the system. People say, "God, that sounds so mechanical." Well, if you don't handle mechanical communications mechanically, they start to mechanicalize your relationship. When you sit down to dinner, well, are you going to pick up the kids? Did you handle that? Yin and yang. It's like, oh my God. We don't have any of that stuff bothering us when we have our personal time together, because it's all in our systems.
Yeah, it's just the segregation of your different time, what role you're playing at one particular time.
Yeah, it's not so much time. Catherine and I, we don't have times. We kind of have our habits about when we are at our desk and when we do that. We eat dinner together, but kind of now we fix our own lunches, so we don't have to try to coordinate even that. But we walk the dog together, in the morning, and there's some tradition, but otherwise, we don't have any rules, about any of that. But if you need to make them, you need to have some, but you need to be highly flexible and all that. I think once people sort of kind of understand and get this, most people I think are going to be cooperative.
Yeah. So you have published another book, which is GTD for Teens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that apply to the children less than 10 years of age, let's say 7 years old? Because that's the age when if something you teach them, then that's going to stay forever.
Depends on how easily they can read and sort of understand the concept. They're not hard. And we've had kids 8, 9, 10 years old learn GTD and get it, because one of the co-authors, Mark Wallace, is a public school teacher in the States. And he's teaching his kids that are 8, 9, 10 years old. GTD has for a couple of years. So they can get it. I don't know that the book might be the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to have the parents get it and then translate the concept to their kids. As soon as a kid can understand, well, how would you like the party to be? What would your ideal thing be? And then, well, what's the next step? What do we need to do next, do you think? As soon as they understand that conversation, they're already doing GTD. And kids love it if you give them a box and say, "Hey, let's go play a game. Let's go pick up everything that's not where it belongs and throw it in the box." They go, "Okay, we go do that." And then let's pull them out one at a time and say, "Where does that go? Let's put that over there." Oh my God. The kids get that. There are a lot of adults that don't. So it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be that, it's not that sophisticated. The results can be tremendous, for sure. But there are kids now that ex-head of IT homeschooled his 5 girls, and I met his oldest twin girls when they were, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, and they're now in their 20s and 30s, and in their 20s, and they're like executives almost. They just, the world is their oyster because they just grew up with this.
Yeah.
They say, why would you ever keep stuff in your head? What a dumb idea. So you're right. That'd be the place to get people to change, because kids just go, oh, how do I do it? Okay, that's how I do that. Great. Most adults are going, I don't need to do all that. I don't know.
Tidy up example is actually telling me that if I have to teach them and if they're not able to understand the language, then I just do it in front of them so that they can see me and repeat doing that.
Sure. And just find out in their language, they
Yeah.
understand where something is not where it belongs. They understand, well, what's the next thing you think you need to do?
That
I
is
want to
so
learn to ride. I want to learn to ride a horse. Great. Now you have a project. Figure out if you can learn to ride a horse. What would be the next thing you need to do? Well, I don't know. Well, how could you find out?
Questioning and showing them how to do it.
Well, yeah. Obviously, if you're doing it, that's first, so that you know the value of it, and that makes it easier for you to translate it into whatever their language is and their context.
Have you ever thought about having GTD, as such a powerful method it is? Have you thought about putting it into some sort of academic textbooks so that children know it before they realize that they're struggling to getting things done?
No, we've tried for the years to find if there was an opening to get this into the educational system, and there's lots of routes to do that, but we've never found a really good one yet. So there are people, our partner in the US, Vital Smarts, as well as our partner in the UK, Next Action Associates, I think they've got some people exploring, how to, potentially create some programs for kids, not necessarily that young, but the teenagers at that level. So I don't know. It's not my area of expertise. I don't have kids, so I'm not, don't know how you do that. And apparently, it's quite a hard world to get into from a business standpoint. Just hasn't shown up as something, as an easy or an obvious next step, for us to do that.
Other than reading the book, what are the other ways that one can get involved and become a GTD expert, for example, just to give you an idea of how to get involved?
Well, there are lots of ways to do that. I mean, gettingthingsdone.com is our website. There's lots of things on there, some, simple ideas about the 5 stages that I've mentioned before, a free newsletter that's got, interesting stuff in it, and that comes out regularly. Wherever you are, if you're interested in a deeper dive with this, we have, 3 levels of getting things done training: fundamentals, projects and priorities, and focus and vision. And those are 3 stepped levels of training that are offered out there. Actually, if you're in the UK, Next Action Associates does that. If you go to our website and look on training and coaching, click on that and then type in your country, you'll see who's we've certified to do training and coaching. And there are public seminars around this, as well as in-house, doing a lot of in-house work with companies and organizations that want to do this, and a lot of individual coaching that's being done. So those are, the more in-depth ways if you wanted to play. The book is a manual for it. I had somebody tell me they'd read the book 22 times. It was a whole different book every time they read it. So yeah. It's one of those kind of things that has a lot of, there's a lot you don't read the first time you read it. And the second time you read it, you go, oh yeah, I should do that one too. And so again, the Getting Things Done workbook, which we just published, gives an easy sort of step-by-step for people that if you're not familiar with GTD and you want to really get started in an easy way, because again, the book itself can be a bit overwhelming, and I wrote the whole manual there. And so a lot easier perhaps for people to take the 10 steps to implement GTD, to be able to do that. So those are all ways to play. There are public forums out there all over the place. Just do a Google search on GTD and you'll be overwhelmed by all the conversations and all the stuff going on.
Yeah.
And certainly, as you mentioned, a lot of tools out there have been designed around this. They're all list managers, which is for different bells and whistles. Meet somebody who's doing GTD. That's another great way to do it. See how they're doing it. Ask them, what they're getting out of it.
Yeah. So going back to the tools, that there are hundreds of tools have been built on the method. What are your personal well, not favorite, but what tools do you use to implement GTD in your personal life?
Well, I'm using an overlay in what used to be Lotus Notes and then IBM Notes, because that's been our organizational, email and storage and database, application. So it's just a list manager inside of that. You could use Outlook for to do the same kind of things, or anything that's got tasks that you can organize into different categories. And so I use that. I have a lot of reference material in different places. We use Dropbox a lot. I use Evernote a lot, and just typical tools, Excel and Word, and typical office tools, all those. But for my reminder system is basically a list manager that sits on top of our enterprise application.
Now that GTD is got a huge history already, have you achieved your life goal, or you have something more to do with this or with something else? Or what's your long-term objective?
Well, the objective is to create a world where there are no problems, only projects. So I don't know how much of that I'll see before I check out. So I keep doing it, and I'm doing that now. So anybody who starts to get, wait a minute, what's got my attention? What I want to have true about that. And it gets people, I mean, just what if nobody in the world complained or felt victim to anything, but took the current reality and decided what they want to have true, and then started to move and engage on that positively? Wow, what a different world it would be. Because we've certainly seen that for thousands of people over the last 35 years since I sort of came up with this stuff and published it, that happens. And I'm not saying that's easy, but that'll be a different world. So again, that's our vision, as an enterprise in terms of what we're doing. So there's not going to be any end to that. I don't think I could stop doing this if I tried.
And when you look back in the history to where you were and where you have taken to this level, how do you feel?
Well, it feels great. I mean, I feel like I've really been blessed by the powers that be, that I, was able to finally, after many years of agonizing, not knowing what I wanted to do, to have landed on something that creates absolutely no harm. As a matter of fact, anybody who gets involved in any of this, it improves their condition. And I've been able to make a career out of that, and that's cool.
And finally, how can people reach you?
Well, I'm dallen45 on Instagram. I'm GTD guy on Twitter. You can get on the website and you can send a note to me personally through the web.
Okay, so I'm going to put all of those details down in the description. And thank you very much for inventing such a profound method, David.
Sure.
It is changing millions of lives. So thanks a lot for that.
Oh, also, Ajay, I forgot to mention, we've got a very rich, as you probably know, GTD channel on YouTube. So if you just go to the GTD channel, there's all my TEDx's that I've done and all kinds of interviews that I've done and so forth. And it's, so you can just surf all of that. There's plenty there. Also, if you go to my website and the David Co, gettingthingsdone.com/4Ts, TTTT, 2-minute tips for turbulent times. There are 30 of those little 2-minute tips that I've got in there. So people might find that useful or fun to click on some of those.
Very, very useful. I watched it yesterday and I watched the concise version where you put all of those tips in one single video. Thank you very much, David, for your time. I really and sincerely appreciate it. It was so much of knowledge that you have distributed with the world. It's amazing. Thanks a lot for that.
My pleasure, Ajay. Thanks for the invitation. Yay.
And guys, if you are new to GTD, then there is a lot of information available on Google, just on internet. Just search for GTD or David Allen. You'll find plenty of videos. Watch them. They will change the way you look at things and how you manage your tasks and your priorities. It is actually really profound. So please have a look at that. I will leave all the links that David has mentioned in the description. So if you just want to browse through, then please feel free to do so. I hope you found this video very, very much valuable. And if you have not yet done so, then this is the time to please do consider subscribing to this channel by hitting the subscribe button and tapping on the bell icon so that you get notification to all my future videos. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again.